Welcome to Food as Medicine, brought to you by the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County in partnership with the Mosher Foundation. I'm Kayla Malari, Senior Nutrition Manager at the Food Bank, and thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome. The program is all about reconnecting the enjoyment of whole foods and building food-related knowledge, skills, and mindfulness. Today's session, prebiotics and probiotic foods, the care and feeding of your microbiome for optimal health. Our expert speakers, Vibeke Walden and Randy Miller, will explain the differences between these nutrients, discuss factors that can weaken our microbiome, as well as share foods that help nourish it. Before I introduce our speakers, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping items. So please use the Q&A or chat feature for questions, which we'll have a session at the end for all of our Q&A. We also have interactive chat questions throughout the presentation, so please engage. We'd love to hear from you all. You can access this recording along with past sessions on our YouTube Food as Medicine playlist. We'll also share that in the link in the chat. And you'll also receive a follow-up email with links to the recording as well as a handout created by our guest speakers. Finally, your feedback is invaluable in helping us improve, so please fill out the feedback form that will appear after the session. We're using a new Zoom feature, so right after the session ends, that feedback form will pop up automatically. Now, let me go ahead and introduce our speakers. So we have Vibeke Walden, a retired nutrition therapy practitioner with a master's in psychology and a former food bank board chair. We also have Randy Miller, a certified functional nutrition counselor and integrative health coach. Both currently serve on the Food Bank's Education Committee, and we are so grateful to feature their expertise today. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Randy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Randy Miller. As always, we want to start with one big disclaimer, and that is that Vibeke and I are not doctors. So everything we say today is meant purely as education and information and not as medical advice. We always strongly encourage you to discuss any and all of what we say today with your doctor. Reminder, we're going to talk about many different foods today, but of course, everyone's unique. And if there's a food we talk about that you don't tolerate well or that your healthcare provider has said to avoid, then please follow their instructions. Don't ignore your body's signals. We're talking in very broad generalizations today, so you do what's right for you. Also, there's no need to take notes. As Kayla said, we've created a handout that contains a full summary of everything we'll talk about, plus tips and tricks and recipes, so you're going to get all that. Plus, there will be the video replay that will be posted by the food bank. So let's dive in. What exactly is our microbiome? Our microbiome is an ecosystem made up of trillions of microbes, bacteria, yeast, fungi, viruses, and other single-celled organisms that live inside us and all over us. They are teeny tiny microscopic and are almost everywhere. They're on our skin, they're in our mouths and noses, they're inside our digestive and urinary tracts. They are literally all over us. In fact, there are so many microbes living inside us that scientists estimate an average adult has 38 trillion microbes, 38 trillion microbes, and only 30 trillion human cells. So more microbe than human, just kind of crazy. Okay, now we want to engage with our first chat question. Can anyone guess how much all of these microbes collectively weigh?
So please guess your answers in the chat. So we have A, 5 ounces, B, 1 pound, C, 3 pounds, and then D, 5 pounds. We're getting some answers. So I see some D's, some 5 pounds, 5 pounds again, 5 ounces. We kind of have a variety of answers, actually. We have some D's, A's. I'm seeing a lot of D's. And C's and B's. All right, I think we have most of the answers. And again, a lot of C's, D's, B's, and A's actually.
It's a tough question because 38 trillion is a lot, but they're teeny tiny. But the answer is D. The microbes living inside us and on us collectively weigh 5 pounds. It's a lot, 5 pounds of microbes. Now, 95% of these microbes actually live in one area of the body. I don't know if you can guess what that one area is, but it's our gut. And specifically the lowest part of the gut called the colon. So today, we're going to focus on that particular ecosystem of gut microbes, which you've probably heard referred to as the gut microbiome. So the next question is, why should you care about your gut microbiome? Well, it turns out these trillions of microbes in your gut are extremely powerful and directly communicate with many parts of your body, including your immune system, your skin, your DNA, and even your brain. They do incredible things like break down some of the food you eat and produce substances that you depend on, like B vitamins, vitamin K, short-chain fatty acids, all of which are essential to health. They actually perform so many functions that scientists are just now beginning to understand the extent of their impact on our health. But what we do know is that your gut microbiome is involved in more functions than we can possibly cover today, which is why we want to show you this next slide. So this next slide can look a little overwhelming, but the point of it is not for you to remember all of these things that the microbes do. It's just to see the sheer number of ways they can impact our health. So you can see here functions like modulation of bone mass density. That means these microbes influence your bone health. Fat storage and metabolism, meaning they play a role in weight management and fat storage. Resistance to pathogens, and on and on and on. All of this means the microbes living inside your gut can influence how your skin looks, how your genes act or how your genes don't act, how much inflammation you have going on at one time, how your immune system behaves, your mood, whether you feel depressed and anxious or clear and optimistic, and so much more. Your microbiome does so much that without it performing these functions, our health would disintegrate. So at the end of the day, the reason you should care about having a healthy microbiome is because a healthy microbiome means a healthy you. And conversely, an unhealthy or unbalanced microbiome can lead to all kinds of health challenges and disease states. Now get ready for some good news. Isn't it nice to get good news? You can change your microbiome for the better in as little as 2 to 4 days. Yes, you heard right. Within 2 to 4 days of eating foods that your gut bacteria thrive on, which we are going to cover in detail today, your gut microbiome can change for the better. Okay, so now you know what your gut microbiome is. You understand how much it does for your health. Get ready to meet some of your microbes.
Okay, hi everybody, Vibeke here. Thanks Randy and thanks Food Bank for hosting us today. Okay, let's talk about those microbes and what are some names of these microbes in our microbiome. And I'm still seeing Randy on the screen. I just want to double check and make sure that the camera's on the right person.
It should be on
And I will
both.
continue. Okay.
I think you're good. Yeah.
I'm good. Okay. Okay. So anyway, there are over 5,000 species of microbes that live in and on us. And you've probably heard some of the names before because we've certainly been talking about Lactobacillus acidophilus for a long, long time. You might remember that one from yogurt and first generation probiotics. But as you can see represented on the slide, there are thousands more species of microbes with very complicated Latin names. And scientists are really still just beginning to understand what they do. Studying the microbiome is a lot like studying the ocean. We do know some things, But there is so much more going on than we understand, and the possibilities are so vast that it will likely take us generations to make significant headway on this. But one perspective that has changed in the recent past is that before, we were focused mostly on replenishing particular strains of microbes for everyone, like that Lactobacillus acidophilus. We just wanted to make sure everybody had it. But now the focus seems to be shifting from strains to functions. So the functions that those strains perform. So instead of thinking that everyone needs the same strains of microbes, scientists are now beginning to understand that we can actually all have different strains and different looking microbiomes, as long as those microbiomes perform the necessary functions for your health. So from that, it follows that given all the different functions, you saw that big slide that Randy showed you of all the different ways they impact your health. We are going to need a large diversity of microbes to ensure that all of these diverse and important functions are happening. So a healthy microbiome can actually look as unique as a fingerprint as long as it is diverse. We want diversity. And then the question then becomes, if everybody's microbial ecosystem is different, and if we don't really even know which strains we need, how do we know how to improve our own microbiome? And then from there, how do you figure out what to eat? So those are exactly the questions we're going to try to answer today. And so the big question is, how do I keep my microbiome healthy and diverse with food? And of course, we're going to focus on food because we are the food bank, where our philosophy is that food is medicine, and that holds true for your microbiome as well. So there are two big categories of food that we can focus on to foster a robust microbiome, and they are prebiotic foods and probiotic foods. And we are going to clarify those terms, but before we do that, we do want to get a feel for how much you already know. So we are going to do another chat question.
All right, so the next chat question, what's the difference between probiotic and prebiotic? We have a probiotic is a microbe and a prebiotic is food for microbes. We have B, a probiotic is food for microbes and a prebiotic consists of microbes. And then C, a prebiotic is consumed before a meal and a probiotic is consumed after a meal. And then lastly, we have D, all of the above. And please enter your guesses in the chat. All right, I'm seeing a lot of answers. I see a lot of A's. I see a D and a B. We have a few more coming in. We have a B, a D, and an A. A lot of A's, it looks like. So the correct answer, and I think most of you got it, is A. Probiotics are microbes, while prebiotics are the foods that nourish those microbes. And Vibeke will explain these differences in more detail in the next slide.
So the lingo here can be confusing. Pre and pro, they don't really indicate much of anything, in my opinion, linguistically. So let's get everyone on the same page. Prebiotics, as Kayla said, they are illustrated on the right side of this slide. They are not microbes. Prebiotics are food for the microbes, kind of like your microbes ordered DoorDash. And so they like to eat. And just as we need to eat for energy and nutrients, so do our microbes. And like us humans, different microbes prefer different foods. And choosing different foods that your beneficial microbes thrive on helps them perform all those important functions we talked about. Now, probiotics on the left side of this slide are the actual microbes themselves. So those are things like that Lactobacillus acidophilus, Saccharomyces boulardii. There's a million Latin names. You saw them on that earlier slide. Probiotic foods are foods that are covered in or contain those microbes. And by eating them, you're like adding new neighbors to the neighborhood, new microbes to the microbiome. And so prebiotics, just to summarize, are food for your microbes. Probiotics are the microbes themselves.
Okay, so you may be wondering, how on earth do I eat prebiotics? It's not like you go to the store and you're like, oh, it says prebiotics everywhere. Which foods are prebiotic? Meaning, which foods do our gut microbes love to eat? The answer is any foods that contain fiber and or polyphenols. And guess what? Both fiber and polyphenols are found abundantly in plants. So as usual, eating your fruits and veggies is a great choice. We've said many times that eating the rainbow, meaning eating a variety of diversely colored plants, never steers you wrong, and it applies here as well. But on the topic of prebiotics, let's start with fiber. Which plants are exactly high in fiber? Well, some of the more well-known ones are beans, legumes, and pulses. So foods like your favorite beans, whether they're kidney beans, black beans, garbanzo beans, also known as chickpeas, lentils, peas, even peanuts are legumes. All of these are high in fiber and therefore are prebiotic foods that will feed your beneficial microbes. So we wanted to be pretty practical today. How can you easily incorporate these into your meals? Here are some ideas for inspiration. You can snack on edamame beans or peanuts or wasabi peas. You can make hummus out of chickpeas and olive oil and eat it with cut up veggies like jicama sticks, which you're going to see are going to appear as high fiber veggies. You can make soups like minestrone that contain beans and veggies, or make dishes like refried beans, black beans, pinto beans. You can eat lentils as your main protein, or you can make a lentil soup. So these are all ideas to help you figure out, how can I eat more prebiotic food? And in this case, more beans, legumes, and pulses. Just one note here, beans and legumes and pulses, they can cause gassiness for some people, as we all know. So if you're not used to eating them, don't start big. Start small, just small quantities, and then slowly build up over time, and it will get easier and easier. Our next category of high fiber prebiotic foods is nuts and seeds. So not only do nuts and seeds contain healthy omega fats, but they're full of prebiotic fiber that your microbes love. And for me, I find nuts and seeds also happen to be very portable. You can have them with you easily. They don't need refrigeration, and they're low glycemic, so not high in sugar. Some ideas for integrating them into your day are snack on your favorite nuts, almonds, walnuts, pecans, macadamia, pistachios, whichever ones you love. They're all great choices. You can use nut butters in smoothies or as part of your breakfast or in snacks. So an example snack might be an apple with nut butter or sunflower seed butter. Or you can add chia seeds, which I eat pretty much daily, or ground flax seeds to your granola or your cereal or your yogurt or your smoothies. Just a note on flaxseed, if you're not super familiar with using it, it's a great choice, but it's important to know that we can't actually digest those full seeds without grinding them. So either buy the whole seeds, it will say flax seeds on the package, and grind them in a coffee or spice grinder. And you just do 1 week at a time and you store that in your fridge. It turns into flax meal. So once you grind up the seeds, it's called flax meal, and that's what you put in your food because that's more easily digestible. Or if you don't want to grind your own, you can buy that pre-ground flax meal and just keep it in your freezer. That will keep those precious flax oil in the seeds from going rancid on you. And if you're not familiar with chia seeds, one idea is to make a chia pudding. And we gave you a recipe on the next slide, and it's also in your packet. So here's a picture of a breakfast chia pudding. I eat this regularly. It's high fiber and high polyphenol and high in antioxidants too. So super nutritious breakfast that checks a lot of the boxes. So to make it, you start with the basics. You take 2 tablespoons of chia seeds, and this is where most of your fiber will come from. If you like cocoa or cacao, you can add that for polyphenols. Use whatever milk you like. I use unsweetened almond milk, but if you love dairy, use dairy. If you like coconut milk, use coconut milk. And just stir, stir, stir. So you mix the seeds and the milk and you stir, stir so that the seeds don't clump. That's my biggest tip when you're doing anything with chia seeds. They clump really easily, so shake them up longer than you think you have to. Then add any of the options below. I add pumpkin seeds for more fiber. I add protein powder because I like to have a high protein breakfast. It makes me feel better during the day. And then I mix that all up and I put it into the fridge. It can be in the fridge for as little as 2 hours or overnight or last in your fridge for several days. And the seeds will absorb the liquid and it will turn into this pudding-like consistency that you see here. So I personally, I'll make 3 or 4 of them at a time, and then I just keep them in my fridge and I can grab them and they're easy and portable and I like them. And actually I just made my husband eat one and he actually liked it. So that's chia pudding. So what about fruit? Which fruits are high in fiber? Well, all berries are high in fiber, and raspberries and blackberries really pack a fiber punch. Not to mention, they're high in antioxidants and vitamins and minerals. So when you're eating these foods, we're talking specifically about fiber and polyphenol for your microbiome, but when you're eating these whole foods, you're actually getting layers of health benefits. So that's another benefit of a whole food diet. That's why we're always talking about eat a whole food diet as opposed to an ultra processed diet, because you want those layers of health benefits. So berries, high in fiber. Avocados are high in fiber. Yes, avocados are a fruit. If you like pomegranate, the seeds, which are called arils, are also a great choice. And one of our favorites, Vibeke and I love passion fruit, and it is surprisingly high in fiber. And it's sort of the end of passion fruit season right now, so it's a good time to try passion fruit. Now for the vegetable category. Here are some great high fiber options. And of course, it's always easy to integrate a veggie or 2 as a side dish with your main protein into any meal. So asparagus is something I go to a lot. I just boil it for 2 minutes, then I toss it in good quality olive oil and a little salt, and it's fast and easy and fresh. And I've actually had people ask me what I did to my asparagus, and that was literally it. Artichokes are great, freshly steamed or marinated. Sweet potatoes and yams, which you can bake or mash or roast with olive oil and salt. Brussels sprouts are high in fiber, easy to roast. Beets, you can roast those, throw them into salads. Sauteed kale and mustard greens with olive oil and salt and garlic and lemon. Jicama, which we talked about before, eating that as a snack or putting it into a salad. Sunchokes or Jerusalem artichokes are very high in fiber, so much so that you want to be careful if you're not used to those. Go slowly, because those can actually also make you quite gassy. And one of my favorites, hearts of palm. So those aren't commonly known, but they're great to keep in your pantry. And we wanted to inspire you to try something new. So here's one of my go-to recipes, and it's called an avocado and hearts of palm salad. It's a recipe from a cookbook called Chic Simple Cooking. When you make it, I find it a little bit elegant. It's delicious. It's different. It takes literally less than 5 minutes to make. And you can see how simple it is. You just cut everything up. You drizzle some olive oil, some red wine vinegar, some salt, pepper, and your favorite cheese on top, and it's ready to go. So hearts of palm are canned or jarred, so they can live in your pantry, so they're just always hanging around, which makes it really easy to make this dish last minute if you just have some extra avocados or avocados lying around. Both avocado and hearts of palm are high fiber foods, so this is a high fiber salad. And then the extra virgin olive oil is high in polyphenols. So you're checking a lot of important boxes with a really simple, easy, quick recipe. So if you do feel motivated to try this, it is in your packet. So let us know if you try the recipe and if you like it.
All right, we wanted to give mushrooms a special mention when it comes to fiber. Mushrooms are not technically vegetables. They are fungi, and they usually get left out of that rainbow slide that we keep showing you every single presentation we do. But mushrooms contain a special type of fiber called chitin, and the only other foods that contain it are insect exoskeletons, fish scales, and crustacean shells. So unless you plan on eating those things, you should definitely be getting some mushrooms. Now, chitin, being a completely different type of fiber from the other foods we've been talking about so far, supports healthy microbial diversity. Remember, we want diversity. It's a different kind of fiber, so it will encourage different kinds of microbes. And mushrooms, we're all familiar with them. You can eat them raw in salads. You can saute them classically with garlic, olive oil, and salt. Throw them into soups and stews or stir fries. The button and cremini mushrooms that you see everywhere in all the grocery stores are fine. They contain chitin. They're good for you. But if you're inspired, there are so many different kinds of mushrooms, and probably the easiest place to access a lot of varieties is at your local Asian food store. Go check it out. Okay, and lastly, in the high fiber category, we want to mention whole grains. Now, historically, kind of like back in the 70s when I was coming up, people would talk about high fiber foods, and we talked a lot about whole grains. And the three big ones were, we just called it bran, get your bran. And that was typically referring to wheat bran. Also heard about oatmeal a lot and oat bran and brown rice. Those were kind of the big high fiber grains that were sort of commonly in use back then. But now we've come a long way, and we also commonly talk about lots of other grains and pseudo grains, things like barley, quinoa, sorghum, millet, rye, lots of options these days. Now, and all of them can be good fiber choices, but for them to be so, they do have to be truly whole. They have to contain the bran and ideally also the germ, not just the starchy bits. So just generally speaking, the bran is where the fiber is, and the germ is where the vitamins and minerals and those concentrated nutrients are. And there are some caveats when it comes to grains, so let's talk about some of those. Okay, we'll get to this slide in a minute. It's a label from some whole wheat bread, but before we go there, things you should know are that grains can be challenging for folks with, I'll call it dysregulated blood sugar, people with prediabetes or diabetes, because they are very high in carbs. Two, generally, grains do not provide as much nutritional bang for your buck, so nutrients and fiber per calorie, as a lot of the other options that we've been presenting. And the third one, and kind of the big one that we want to get to here, is that packaged grain products are usually heavily processed or refined. And that's what this slide is kind of all about. So this is the ingredient label on a loaf of whole wheat bread. And if you read the first ingredient, it is enriched wheat flour in that little red box, the top box. And what enriched wheat flour is basically just white flour. So it's not the whole grain, it's just plain old white flour. The next ingredient is water. They go through a little breakdown of what's in the white flour, but the next real ingredient is water. And then the third ingredient is whole wheat flour. So there is just enough whole wheat flour in this recipe for the company to legally, according to the FDA, call it whole wheat bread. So with this knowledge in mind, if you do eat packaged food or other packaged whole grain products, I should say, like bread and cereals, there's two things we want to suggest to you. One is make sure they are truly whole. So you want to look for things like 100% on the label. So it should say 100% whole wheat. And you should read the ingredients looking for the word whole. And going back to this example, if this was truly 100% whole wheat bread, the first ingredient would be whole wheat flour, and you wouldn't see any enriched wheat flour. And then the other thing you can do is you can just look on that nutrition label and check the fiber content and go for the highest fiber you can. There are some Ezekiel breads out there that have 3 grams of fiber per slice, which is a pretty high amount of fiber for one slice of bread. And there are other, kind of whole wheat options out there that have less than 1 gram of fiber per slice. So, pay attention to it. And if you can, go for something closer to 3 grams. And while we're talking about grains, let's talk about oats, because I know there are a lot of people who really love their breakfast oatmeal, and you all can rejoice. Oats are actually a uniquely beneficial grain. And this is because they contain a special type of fiber called beta glucan. It's also found in barley, but you don't find barley everywhere. Oats you can find everywhere. So we're talking about oats as a great source of beta glucan. And a very quick aside, mushrooms, and especially shiitake mushrooms, are also an excellent source of beta glucan. So beta glucan appears to be the magic ingredient in oats that is responsible for their famous cholesterol lowering properties. And it also helps with blood sugar regulation. And some of that is related to how it interacts with your microbiome. Here is the interesting thing about beta glucan. Oats, when you cook them, are up to 9% beta glucan. But when they are raw, they are 26% beta glucan. So if you want to maximize your fiber, ideally you don't cook your oats. And so a lot of people don't like putting spoonfuls of raw oats in their mouths. I don't mind it personally, but if you want something a little more prepared, this image is of overnight oats that you can make without cooking. And what you do is you just put your oats in a big bowl with your favorite dairy or non-dairy milk, add a little salt. If you like some sweetener, you can put that in there, and other add-ins, and I'll talk about that in a second. And you just let it sit in your fridge overnight. You can make a big batch, and the next morning you can split it between jars, which is what you're seeing here. And those jars will last for 5 days in your fridge. So they make a super easy grab and go quick breakfast option. And the bonus here is you can add things like those chia or ground flax seeds that Randi was talking about. So really bump up the fiber. You can also add things like protein powder if you want to increase the protein, nut butters, dried fruits. This image shows fresh fruit on top. It's just super customizable to your liking. And we did put a link of to an overnight oats recipe in your packet. So we've been talking about all these great high fiber foods, and this begs the question, how much fiber should a person aim for every day? Generally, these days, 28 to 30 grams is recommended. It's 28 grams for women, 30 to 35 grams a day for men. But the truth is that most of us are getting nowhere near that. Most of us end up getting less than 10 grams of fiber a day. So because of this, we feel that a realistic and achievable target for someone just starting to focus on this is like maybe 20 grams a day. It's a reasonable goal, and it's totally doable with just a bit of mindfulness. And basically it breaks down to, 7-ish grams of fiber per meal. And also eating even small amounts of fiber throughout the day. So 2 grams here, 3 grams there. It can get you to that goal quicker than you think. So, and just an aside, once you do begin eating this much fiber per day, if you're, increasing what you normally do, if you historically have suffered from constipation, you might see improvement. And if you historically have suffered from loose stools, you might also see improvement. So in addition to just helping your microbiome, you could also look out for some improvements in these other areas once you up your fiber intake. But again, and Randi said it once, and we're going to reiterate, if you're not used to eating very much fiber, you really want to build up slowly to avoid gassiness and just tummy discomfort. All right, so how can you achieve that goal of 20, maybe up to 30 grams of fiber a day? Well, here we have put together a small chart of foods that we tend to grab when we want to just get a little hit of fiber. There is a copy of this chart in the packet, and there's also a longer table that lists the fiber content of 50 different foods. Randy put this table together. It's great. So take a look at the packets. This table right here is just a few ideas to get you going. So what we've done here is we've given you serving sizes that each contain 3 grams of fiber. So it's easy for you to do the math. And by increasing the serving size or combining things, you can easily get to 6 or 7 grams of fiber per meal. And that should get you, pretty handily to your 20 grams plus goal. So some fun combos that you might be, enjoy are like a half a cup of cut up jicama dipped in guacamole. Guacamole is avocado, which is a high fiber food. Or you could dip it in a quarter cup of hummus. That's an easy 6 grams of fiber. You could snack on a small apple. And you could add a couple tablespoons of peanut butter, which is not on this chart, but that's 2 grams of fiber. So you get a 5-gram snack. We did just talk about oats. We didn't put them on this chart, but a quarter cup of raw oats gives you 3 grams of fiber. And if you add a tablespoon of these chia seeds, you've got a 6-gram breakfast. Put some berries on top and you're well on your way to your goal. And so you see, and you can add any combo of these items to a salad, along with maybe some nuts and seeds, and the fiber grams add up very quickly. And in fact, let's take a look at a salad example. This is a salad I made a couple weeks ago. The dressing could be anything. There's no dressing specified here because it'd just be anything you want. When I made it, I made a simple lime juice, olive oil, cumin, and salt vinaigrette, just shook it up in a jar. This salad ended up serving 4 people as an entree. So, big honkin' salads. But for 4 people, it breaks down to over 15 grams of fiber per serving. And if you split it up between 8 people as a side salad, each person would still be getting over 7 grams of fiber each. And when I was going through this and I did the fiber calculations, the thing that really jumped out at me was that there are 4 standout ingredients that are really doing the heavy lifting in the fiber department here. And I highlighted them in bold so you could see them. They are jicama and avocado and the black beans and those toasted pepitas or pumpkin seeds. So right there, you have 4 things that you can always use to bump up the fiber content in any salad you make. And all of the other ingredients, of course, add some fiber. And those you can mix and match, in any way you like.
Okay, so that was an extensive look at fiber. Now let's look at the other prebiotic that supports your gut microbiome, because remember it was fiber and polyphenols. So what is a polyphenol? Sounds very sciencey. So you can see the technical definition of a polyphenol here on the slide, but really I just think of it as a fancy way of saying that polyphenols are compounds that come from plants and often give those plants their color. So examples of polyphenols are words you might have heard before, like flavonoids, resveratrol, lignans, anthocyanins, ellagic acid. Now, it isn't important to know their names, but it is important to consume them. And one way to do that is to eat a lot of colorful plants. So who can guess what the next slide's gonna look like? Here it is again. Yet another reason to eat the rainbow, meaning consume a wide variety of colored plants. Because when you consume lots of colors, you're consuming a diverse spectrum of polyphenols. And a diverse spectrum of polyphenols feeds a diverse spectrum of friendly microbes. So that gets us the diversity that Vibeke was talking about that we want in our microbiome. And by the way, if you attended or watched our anti-inflammatory eating presentation, you also know that polyphenols help manage inflammation, Again, layers of benefits through a whole food diet. It's not like you just eat this for your microbiome. You eat it for a bunch of reasons, and you just get layers and layers of health benefits. So the point of this slide is to encourage you to eat colorfully when looking for polyphenols. Example foods that are high in polyphenols include grapes, apples, pomegranates, berries, kiwi, olives, artichokes, and herbs and spices. Think of all those beautiful colors. I don't know about you. I get really excited when I go to a market and you see all those beautiful colors of all those spices. You're just looking at a ton of different polyphenols. Generally speaking, the darker the fruit, the higher the polyphenol content, and seeds and skins tend to also be where a lot of the polyphenol content lies, so don't peel those apples. Now, interestingly, polyphenols are not only found in fruits and veggies. We included this slide because there are a couple of surprise foods that are high in polyphenols that you might not expect. So all teas and coffee are high in polyphenols. So that means all herbal teas, green teas, black teas, rooibos tea, oolong teas, decaf coffee, and regular coffee. Doesn't matter. All good choices for polyphenols. Cocoa or cacao in dark chocolate, high in polyphenols. Extra virgin olive oil, high in polyphenols. And by the way, you can combine coffee and olive oil, as in this picture. I've had an olive oil latte before, and it's weird. It sounds weird, but it's quite delicious. So there's a polyphenol hit for you right now.
Okay, we are done with prebiotics, the food that your microbes love to eat. And what are the two big kinds of prebiotics? Yes, fiber and polyphenols. You've got that drummed into you at this point. So let's move on to probiotics. We're back to this slide. We saw it at the beginning of the presentation when we were talking about microbes and the microbiome. And as we said, probiotics are microbes. So again, the familiar names, or maybe not so familiar, Lactobacillus acidophilus, Bifidobacterium longum, and Breve, and Plantarum, and Akkermansia muciniphila, Saccharomyces boulardii, just a million Latin names, and you actually don't have to know what they are. It's just so you understand how complex and diverse this whole world is. But which foods are probiotic foods? Meaning which foods contain these beneficial microbes? Well, the answer is fermented foods. And what is fermentation? Well, in fermentation, microbes, either living on or added to the food, they eat the carbohydrates in that food and they multiply. So their numbers increase greatly. I've heard one world famous chef refer to fermentation as controlled rot, which I find both true and kind of funny. But basically, fermentation is an age-old way to preserve food. And once fermented, the food contains an abundance of microbes. And you've heard of these foods regularly, I'm sure. They are foods like sauerkraut, like yogurt, like kimchi, or kefir, or kombucha. Anything fermented that still contains live active cultures. You will see that term on a lot of package labels, active cultures. Active cultures are beneficial microbes that are still living. So all of these foods carry beneficial microbes, and when you eat them, you introduce those microbes into the ecosystem of your gut. Now, probiotic foods are less expensive than buying a probiotic supplement. And they can frequently contain a greater diversity of microbes than supplements can. Supplements usually contain a pretty specific list of strains of microbes. But fermented foods contain the microbes that exist all around us and on the foods that are being fermented. So one important note about fermented foods with those active cultures, they are always, always, always found in a refrigerated section of your store. So the sauerkraut and the pickles that are in the condiment aisle next to the ketchup, do not have living bacteria in them. They have been killed by pasteurization. So if you want living, active cultures, you need to shop in the refrigerated section. And then one kind of important caveat is that if you are a person who enjoys kombucha or kefir or yogurt, we're going to suggest that you check the ingredient label for sugar content, because a lot of those products are sweetened. You get your blueberry yogurt and your, vanilla yogurt and whatever the flavor is, but a lot of those can contain a lot of sugar. And ideally, you'd be staying somewhere below 3 to 4 grams of sugar per serving. Now, as far as amounts, we generally recommend eating 1 to 3 tablespoons a day of fermented foods like a sauerkraut or a kimchi. In the drinks department, I drink about a cup of kefir most days. I make my own kefir at home, and I would be happy to share with anyone, how to do that if anybody's interested. But when you introduce fermented foods, if you're not a person who's been eating them, you really want to start slowly to avoid that digestive upset that we've mentioned. If you start too fast, you risk a very upset stomach with lots of gas, and you might get the impression that you just don't tolerate fermented foods. And that might not be true, but what you need to do then is back off, let things settle down, and start over with a half a teaspoon, just a half a teaspoon if you're not a regular fermented food eater, and do that for a week or so, and then slowly increase the amount so that you can just, gradually let your microbiome know what's going on here.
Okay, so that covers probiotic food. And one question we get a lot when we talk about probiotics is, should I take a probiotic supplement? And the answer is, it depends. So deciding on whether to take a probiotic supplement really becomes a matter of your current health habits and status. For example, how much probiotic food do you eat? If you consume foods like sauerkraut or kefir or yogurt regularly, then maybe you don't need a probiotic supplement because you're getting those live bacteria, those live microbes in your food, so you don't need to supplement. However, if you're having trouble tolerating probiotic foods, maybe you have some gut imbalances or a histamine intolerance, then a probiotic supplement might be a good alternative. We can say that when it comes to probiotic supplements, quality really matters. So work with a healthcare provider to choose a high quality one that's right for you and your specific concerns, and preferably one that has scientific research behind it. There's a lot of them out there. So it's really, if you're going to spend the money on one and you're going to take one, let's make sure it's a good one. Now, since we're covering probiotic supplements as an addition to probiotic foods, we wanted to just touch briefly on fiber supplements as an addition to high fiber foods. Again, the big question, should you take a fiber supplement? And again, same answer. It depends. So if you're eating a high fiber diet and you're hitting that 20 to 35 grams of fiber daily with your food, then you probably don't need a fiber supplement. If your bowel habits are normal and you're not struggling with constipation or loose stools, again, it's likely you don't need a fiber product. On the other hand, if you notice your fiber intake tends to be on the lower side for whatever reason, let's say you're getting 10 grams a day or less, and you just don't feel able to increase the consumption of those high fiber whole foods, then a fiber product is something to think about. So the benefits of taking a fiber supplement is that it's easy to work into your daily routine. It doesn't require much thought or planning, which is always helpful. Servings of fiber supplements can range from 2 grams of fiber per serving to 5 grams of fiber per serving. So you'll need to do a bit of math to figure out how much you need to take. Again, just like probiotic foods, just like beans, go slow when working with fiber supplements, because if you start aggressively, you will definitely have digestive distress and you will not like us very much. So start with a small dose and build up over time. And just one other important tip, Don't forget to drink a lot of water with fiber supplements, and really when you're eating fiber too, but mostly with the supplements, because fiber binds to water to produce its benefits. So fiber tends to soak up water, which can dry things out and cause things to stop moving or get stuck, which is not what we want. So hydrate, hydrate, hydrate if you're using a fiber supplement. Now, before we wrap up, we want to briefly mention a few things that can hurt the beneficial bugs in your gut and shift your microbiome in a negative direction. So now you know the ways to make it better: fiber, polyphenols, probiotic foods. But what can harm those beneficial bacteria? Well, unnecessary antibiotics is one. Now, I am not against antibiotics. They can be life-saving, but only take them when you need them. If you don't need them, not good for your microbiome. Sugar tends to favor bad microbes and encourage yeast overgrowth. You've likely heard of things like candida. So less sugar is better for your microbiome. Artificial sweeteners can shift the microbiome in a negative way. So steer clear of things like aspartame, NutraSweet, saccharin, all those artificial sweeteners. NSAIDs like ibuprofen and naproxen, so brands like Advil, Aleve, take as little as possible. And ultra-processed and refined foods. They're low in fiber, they're low in polyphenols, they're generally low in nutrition. So again, not great for the microbiome, whereas you've seen today that a whole food diet, excellent for the microbiome.
Well, we hope today has been helpful for you and that you're going to be able to walk away from here with a little more clarity or information about your microbiome and why it's important for health and how to nurture it. And I just want to do a quick summary before we wrap up here. The main points that we hope you're taking away today are that 95% of your microbiome is in the gut, and those microbes perform important functions and communicate with your whole body. A diverse diet full of prebiotic and probiotic foods supports a diverse microbiome. Now remember, prebiotic foods are high in fiber and polyphenols, and some examples are beans, nuts, seeds, lots of veggies and fruits, whole grains that are still whole, and then polyphenols like coffee, teas, and olive oil, and our favorite chocolate. Probiotic foods are fermented, and they contain beneficial microbes, and examples are kefir, yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. And then lastly, you want to avoid or minimize those substances that can harm your microbiome, like excessive sugar, artificial sweeteners, ultra-processed foods, unnecessary antibiotics, and the prolonged use of NSAIDs like ibuprofen and naproxen. And with that, it is time for our final chat question.
All right. Thank you. So we're at the end. Our final chat question. I believe Randy mentioned this way in the beginning. So if you all were paying attention, you'll get this chat question, no problem. How many days does it take for your gut microbiome to change after eating a diet high in fiber, polyphenols, and probiotics? Everyone's listening really well. So a lot of B's. 2 to 4 days is what everyone seems to be answering. And I'll leave it to Vibeke to explain.
Well done, everybody. The answer is B, and I'm happy to know that people were paying attention. Yes, research has shown that within 2 to 4 days of eating to nurture your microbiome can change. And now we know that nurturing your microbiome means eating lots of fiber, polyphenols, and probiotic foods. So this wraps up the presentation. We want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. We hope you feel inspired now and a little more confident that you know how to nurture your microbiome with food. We are going to stick around for a few minutes to answer any questions that pop up.
All right. One last fun thing we want to do is just a quick takeaway time. If everyone wants to just In the chat, type out one thing that they've learned or a key takeaway. I'll share mine really quickly. It's fiber, 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 color, 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 and actually. So if you want to take a moment to write that in, and at this time, I'd also just really like to thank Randi and Vibeke for their time and expertise. Really, really great material. I think you all have done a great job of practical steps and recipes. Those were my favorite, as well as emphasizing small steps to add extra prebiotics into our diet. We have a lot of questions today. So if you would like, please stick around and we'll jump on those questions. But thank you all also for putting your key takeaways. Everyone's loving the recipes, the value of mushrooms. Mushrooms are always forgotten. So thank you for giving them their spotlight. Oh, I love this one. Will not be afraid of big words anymore. All right, I'll jump into questions, but I'm seeing a lot of really great key takeaways. Thank you all for joining and participating. There are so many questions. Let me go all the way to the top so that we don't miss any. The one that I remember, Randi, you were talking about beans, legumes, and pulses. If you can kind of explain what pulses are. I don't think everyone knows that one.
Well, when I think of pulses, I think of lentils. I think they are categorized as pulses. Vibeke might know the more technical definition.
Oh, I am doing a Google search right now because I did look it up and I forgot. It's a very subtle difference, and I think it has to do with something about the pod that they're in. But let me just update myself again.
All right. And maybe in the meantime, if you or Randi, maybe as Vibeke looks that up, what is the difference between kefir and kombucha?
So kombucha tends to be caffeinated because kombucha is made with tea, often black tea. And so and then kefir is often just made with water or milk, and it doesn't tend to have the caffeine in it. So that's what I think of when I'm choosing between kefir and kombucha. If I don't mind having a little caffeine from tea in there, then I will go kombucha. And if I want something caffeine free, then I'll go kefir.
Yeah, and I would add what they have in common is that they are both fermented using what's called a SCOBY, a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeasts. And they're different scobies. Like you couldn't put a kombucha SCOBY in a bunch of milk and expect to get kefir because that SCOBY really thrives on black tea and with sugar. You have to have sugar to make kombucha. Whereas a SCOBY for kefir is called kefir grains. And kefir is always, 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 always a mammal dairy milk product. That is what kefir grains thrive on. And if you're not going to use a dairy milk, you're going to use water, then you have to get a completely different kind of kefir grains called water kefir grains. So there are some, subtle differences, but generally kefir is, if you just say kefir and you don't qualify it in any other way, it's a milk product. It's a dairy product.
Right. And if you're making it, then the details matter a lot more in terms of what you're starting with. But if you're buying it, then like Vibeke said, you're looking at a milk product, or sometimes it's like a coconut water product, versus something that will have black tea in it, which will be slightly caffeinated.
Okay, who wants to hear about beans, legumes, and pulses?
I do.
Okay, legumes is kind of the umbrella term. So all pulses are legumes and all beans are legumes. Beans refer to, let's see. No, sorry, pulses are the dried seeds of whatever, the plant is. So if they're dried beans or dried peas, dried lentils, those are called pulses.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
We also had several questions or kind of buzz on the oats and the 26% of the beta glucan in raw oats.
Yeah.
I guess some questions around that. Does oat milk have beta glucan that was referenced? And then a follow-up question, are steel cut oats better for you? Or how about gluten-free oats?
Okay, so oat milk, that's, you spin I mean, if you make it at home, you basically, I think you grind up all the oats in a food processor and you soak them, and then you squeeze the water basically out, and then you have oat milk. Correct me if I'm wrong on the details there, but the basic point is you're only using the liquid from the oats and you are not getting the fiber, or if you are, it's going to be a tiny, tiny amount. So I would think there'd be very little beta glucan or any fiber in oat milk. As far as steel cut oats, they are the closest to the original whole oat groat because all they do is just cut it up with a blade. Your rolled oats and your quick cooking oats are, they take the groat and they steam it and they flatten it. Steel cut oats do have a smidge more fiber. It's like 3 grams per quarter cup. But even the quick cooking oats have 2.4-ish. So you're not losing a lot of fiber in that steaming and flattening process. And, I mean, personally, I go for steel cut because I like the texture. I like the chewy. But if you need quick cooking oats, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good, just eat the oats because they still will have the beta glucan in them. And then what was the last part of that question?
Gluten-free.
Gluten-free. Oh, all that means is that the oats have been processed in a facility that does not process wheat or gluten-containing products. So, the fiber will be just the fiber, doesn't matter.
And I think it also means that the oats have to be grown a certain distance from wheat, so there can't be cross-contamination with gluten.
Yep.
So more of a processing type.
Yes, gluten-free oats, it's more about how they're processed. The oat itself never has contained and hopefully will never contain gluten.
Yeah, gluten-free oats are just the same as regular oats. They've just been managed really carefully to not be contaminated with gluten.
Exactly. That's a good way to say it.
Thank you. And I think that was a few folks like key takeaway that the big difference between beta glucan was the cooked and uncooked. And that was also news to me. So thanks for that new information.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Another question from Gloria. When talking about chia seed pudding, she asked about soaking them, I think referring to flaxseed. I think you talked about grinding them. Just what are your thoughts on soaking them as well?
On soaking chia or flax?
Flax, I believe, was the question.
From my understanding, there's no need to soak the flax. So the chia, they start as like these tiny little black seeds that look like poppy seeds. And when you soak them, they absorb the water and they become a bit gelatinous, which is what makes the pudding. Whereas flax seed doesn't, it will soak up some water because it's fiber, but it's not that significant in terms of the experience of eating them or health benefits. So I wouldn't soak flax.
Yeah, there is a whole, in the world of holistic nutrition, there is a lot of information out there about soaking and sprouting nuts and seeds and grains for that matter. And so you can buy sprouted flax seeds that have, they soak to the point where they actually sprout. And the argument is that you're by soaking, you're sort of stimulating, it's the seed of a plant and you're stimulating it to germinate. And there's a chain chemical reaction in the seed. And there are many people who say that when that happens, it makes them easier to digest, one, and it makes the nutrients more bioavailable to your body too. I've seen some reports that doing it for nuts, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. And I'm unsure about grains and seeds. If I have the time, I will soak my seeds. And if I don't, then I don't worry about it too much.
Do you ever soak flax seeds?
I buy them sprouted,
Okay, and then grind them.
and I do grind them. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Christine has a kind of tip here. Soaking flax meal in water can make a vegan substitute for eggs. And so I think soaking might be more of a viscosity type thing or like replacement thing, but to Vibeke's point, not really a nutrition difference unless we're making it more bioavailable there.
Right.
Sprouting.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move over to some probiotic questions. Do probiotics completely die when heating?
That is the fastest way to kill probiotics is to heat them up. Yes.
Yes.
Another question from Gloria. Pickled cucumbers also have probiotics. Is there a general one to consider? And I think you talked about refrigerated versus.
Yes. Yeah. If you go to the grocery store, you will find pickles on the condiment aisle. Those do not have probiotics. But in the refrigerated section now, you can find a pretty fun selection of pickled cucumbers and other pickled vegetables that do have active cultures, and they will say so on the label.
Great.
Yeah.
From Sharon, can dairy-free yogurts have active cultures? I think that's a really good question.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. To make yogurt, you need to ferment something, and it might be a different set of cultures. I'm a dairy lover, and I tolerate it very well, so I don't investigate a lot of dairy-free options. But I know there's certainly coconut yogurt out there that has live active cultures. So yes.
Yeah, generally speaking, as far as I know, they're adding the bacteria to the substance, whether it's a non-dairy substance or a dairy substance, and those little guys are fermenting away, and I don't think it matters what substance they use.
Yeah, only in the case of kefir, kefir grains, in the classical sense, they must have a dairy milk. You cannot make kefir with coconut milk using regular kefir grains.
All right, we are over time, but if Randy and Vibeke are willing, there's two to three more questions if you want to continue.
Sure,
Okay.
I can.
Yeah.
Second. Okay, from JG, some articles have talked about lectins in some nuts and grains which cause weight gain or other health issues. What are your thoughts on those viewpoints?
I think lectins had a moment where everybody was really worried about them, and then we kind of realized that lectins are in practically everything. And I don't know, it's like if you're really trying to avoid lectins, you're not going to have a lot of food options. And we want you to have a diverse diet. And as far as prioritizing things to worry about in the world, I don't think lectins should be anywhere near the top of anyone's list, unless they have a specific intolerance, of course, right?
Yeah, I think if you have autoimmune issues and particular autoimmune issues, I know Dr. Gundry's whole book, The Plant Paradox, is all about lectins. So if you ever want to do a deep dive into lectins, that's a good place to start. So I think some people with autoimmune issues can have intolerances, and there's ways to reduce them, like pressure cooking certain things like oats and grains. But generally, I wouldn't worry about them, like Vibeke says, for the average person, unless you're having symptoms of something and no other things you're doing are relieving those symptoms, then it's a good avenue to explore. But for the average person, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah. And I guess I would also add that all these plant polyphenols, many of them they're there to protect the plant, and they are kind of slightly toxic. And by ingesting small amounts of those toxins, many of them, they actually help us upregulate body systems that protect us. So it's actually good for us to have a little bit of a challenge in that way, because we become healthier as a result.
Thank you. All right. Another kind of larger question. Some diets, carnivore, low carb, are better for you versus plant-based or whole food diets, which typically higher in carbs. What are your viewpoints on this claim? Should or shouldn't animal products be avoided? The more, this is from JG, I read, I think both sides are correct, and the key is to avoid processed foods in general and anything with added sugars outside of honey and maple syrup.
Yeah, we actually did a whole other presentation for the food bank called Which Diet is Right for Me? And we went through the carnivore and the paleo and vegetarian and vegan and Mediterranean. And we came to pretty much the same conclusion. Everybody's different. There's no one right diet for everyone. Some people will thrive on one diet and not on another. So I think that's a personal journey. It's personal preferences. Eat a whole food diet, eat what works for you, what your body tolerates, and I think you'll be in good shape.
Okay. Yes, again, there's no one size like fits all approach to that. And also, I think we mentioned this, or there were some questions in the chat. Randy had mentioned the anti-inflammatory presentation as well. And I think Gloria asked, all the presentations are on our YouTube channel, including the what diet is right for you. So if you want to watch those, are all available on our YouTube channel, which Ray has linked in the chat. So feel free to take a look at those. And then we'll end it with one final question from Catherine. So a Reuben sandwich, delicious. Does that kill the sauerkraut probiotic?
I would say no, not unless you're heating the sauerkraut.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you put it in a panini press and heat it, you're going to damage some of those microbes. But if the sauerkraut has to be cold. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. If you put your pastrami on the bread and then you put your sauerkraut on top, you're good to go.
All right.
I'll
Approved.
not be able to melt the cheese though.
A Reuben sandwich is approved. All right. I think that ends our presentation. I'm just going to bring up the last slide really quickly. I think there's a little something there. Let me just share. I believe it's just a thank you. Thank you for joining. Please share your thoughts on the presentation by participating in the feedback survey. Again, it will pop up automatically once we end this webinar. Truly, that just helps us be better and improve our program. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Randy, Vibeke, for your expertise and time. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.